Mr. Doug Stanhope says, be a player, not a spectator in life. What does that mean? You ever met somebody who just tells you about everything that happens in their lives, but they don't actually do anything about the things that happen in their lives? They'll tell you everything that's going wrong. They'll tell you all the things that are, falling off the rails, and life is just going into the toilet. And then you ask them, what are you going to do? Well, there's nothing I can do. I can't do anything. I'm just sort of stuck here. Those are spectators. Individuals who do not take responsibility for their contribution to their own lives. By the very nature of who it is and what we do, we own our responsibility in this process of that we call life, in this thing that we call our reality. We are an integral part of that process. So therefore, everything that occurs in our lives, we have the ability to either interpret as a positive, gain a lesson from, learn and grow from, or to become more mental shackles for us, limits on why we cannot do what we do. It's a decision. How you react to situations is the power that you've been given. Controlling the way you think, your own self-talk. I was talking about this with a friend earlier this week. The way you think about yourself is a constant and consistent dialogue that goes on in your head. The way that you think about yourself is the one person you can escape from, and that is a constant drone in your mind. You must decide whether or not you listen to those fears that go on in your head, the demons in the back of your head, the things that tell you that you're doing something wrong, or undermining the way you think. You have to choose whether or not you listen to those, or like Les Brown says, you turn around and tell them, shut up. That's not who I am. Whether or not you combat them or you just accept it. That's just, that's how I think. I talk about it all the time, this thing that people say, well, that's just how I am. As if that's a certainty. Every 7 years, everything about your body completely changes and regenerates. You lose your skin is completely new, your bones are completely new, your brain is completely new, because all those cells go through their cycle, live, are born, live their cycle, and then die. And then you have new ones that are born. And so you have a completely new body about every 7 years or so. So that's a constant change. That is a constant thing that's going on in your body, that you're constantly changing. So the idea that, well, that's just how I am, is an illusion. That's simply a mindset that you've chosen to lock yourself into, as if it's not going to have a consequence on your life, as if that's not going to have a consequence on the outcome of your existence, as if you are not participating in your own life. And that's simply not true. Ezra Taft Benson says, if a man does not control his temper, it is a sad admission that he is not in control of his thoughts. Why do we have to control our thoughts? The way you think about something is the meaning that you give it. Once you give it meaning, you have an emotional reaction to that meaning. There's an emotional attachment to the way that we think. If your constant inner dialogue is telling you how worthless you are, telling you how bad of a person you are, telling you how much you haven't achieved in life, telling you how much you failed, well then how are you going to feel about yourself? Not very good. If that's the inner dialogue you're listening to, or even if it's the external dialogue that you're allowing in and giving meaning that it's true. If someone calls you, ugly or stupid or worthless or a failure, you have a choice when you hear that to simply go, yeah, you're right. Or to go, yeah, screw you. That's not true. And the way you combat the outer dialogue is by combating the inner dialogue, by telling yourself what's true. How you think about you determines whether or not what someone says about you hits home or not. The reason it hits home is because somewhere in you, you believe it's true. And you have to ask yourself, why do I believe that about myself? And is it true? Controlling those thoughts helps you to control the emotions related to those thoughts. How you feel about yourself has a significant emotional attachment. It colors everything you see in the world. Whether or not you take that risk and go for that new job, whether or not you take that risk and try to talk to that new person, whether or not you take that risk and try to pursue your dream, whether or not you do the things that are important to you is based on how you feel about you, which is based on how you think about you. So why do we control our thoughts? Because thoughts breed emotions. Emotions color our world. Mariano Rivera says if you don't control your emotions will control your acts. And that's not good. My favorite line that I hear from people that I counsel is, I couldn't help it, I got so upset. I couldn't help it. I was so upset, I was so mad, I just couldn't help it, I said it. I was so sad, I just couldn't help what I did. And that always puzzled me. Because my dad was a big believer in the idea that you are responsible for yourself as an adult. You are responsible for what you do. You are responsible for what you do when you're happy. You're responsible for what you do when you're sad. You're responsible for what you do when you're angry. Having an emotion does not absolve you of responsibility. And he kind of hammered that into my head early on. So I have a difficult time when adults tell me I couldn't help it because I felt blah, blah, blah. Sure you could. You made a decision. As if the outcome was not related to your action. Because somewhere you believe that because I'm feeling this, whatever happens just is supposed to happen. And that's not true. You make a decision. If your boss decides to give you grief one day and you decide to just go off on your boss, that does not change the fact that you got fired. You can't say, well, I got fired because my boss went off on me. No, you got fired because when your boss went off on you, you decided to call him a jerk in front of the whole board or whatever, and he decided to let you go. Just because you feel an emotion does not absolve your responsibility about what you do. Why do we control our thoughts? Because our thoughts breed emotions. And if we don't control our emotions, well then those emotions control our actions. And when we act from an emotional place that we are out of control, we have no control over the outcome. We have given up our power. And that's a decision. And I know that sounds like, well, we can't walk around controlling our emotions all the time. I'm not saying that you have to, decide from moment to moment what emotion to feel. We're not robots. But you do have to decide how far you go with your emotions. You have to at least be conscious of the fact that I have some say in how I react to my emotional states. That's like saying, okay, well, I got angry, so I smashed in my ex's windshield. Well, I was mad, so does that stop the police from arresting you? No. Does that stop you from having to pay restitution? No. Does that stop people from, kind of looking at you like, are you crazy? No. What you do is a decision. How much responsibility you take for that decision determines your emotional maturity. So why is that a thing? Stan, I don't want to be in control of my emotions. Maybe I just want to feel things. I just want to feel it and let it go. Okay? Well, then you are making a decision to give up control of your outcomes. How many people know people who are brilliant? Just brilliant people, but who have no control over their lives because they're on this emotional roller coaster all the time. Up and down and up and down. And they're successful and then they fail. And they're successful and then they fail because they keep self-sabotaging. Well, because there's a connection. Thoughts determine your emotions and your emotional states. Emotions determine your actions. Your actions become habits. Habits become your reality. Brian H. McGill says that comfort in expressing your emotions will allow you to share the best of yourself with others. But not being able to control your emotions will reveal your worst. Anybody ever said something to someone in the heat of an argument or the heat of emotion that you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that? You ever write that email or make that text that you're like, man, I wish I could take that back? Because you said something you never thought you'd say. You did something you never thought you'd do. You crossed the line and you're like, how do you feel when you do that? Not great, huh? When you do damage to someone, when you hurt them in a way that you cannot take back because you were angry. Being emotionally out of control causes you to act in ways that you can't determine. You create outcomes that you weren't expecting and in most cases, didn't want. When you're angry with someone, you don't want them destroyed in most cases. Sometimes you do, but in most cases you don't. You're just mad at the moment. And afterwards, when you calm down, you don't feel that way. But yet, the things that you've done when you were angry have outcomes. They have consequences.